Fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to another episode of the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. I'm Kevin Knight at Falcoholic Kevin here now with my co-host for this show, Tre'Shon Diaz. He's at Tre'Shon. Tre'Shon, we've had a good time getting started this season, and I think we both realized that it was time to make this thing official and get you on here for the rest of the season. Because I think this has been a fun show, and I think the fans have really enjoyed it. So happy to have you on. Welcome to your first official show as the co-host of this early week show that is yet to be named. I don't know if we'll come up with a catchy name or if we'll just freestyle it, but how you doing today, Tre'Shon?
I'm doing good, and yeah, I really think we got something cooking here. It's been nice to be able to kind of, therapeutically talk through some of these games
Yeah,
and outcomes, and talk ourselves both down from the ledge, and then also, try to reel ourselves in, back from the stratosphere too, and when things have gone really well. So, excited to be here, and we have a really good one to talk about.
yeah. A lot in this game to break down, a lot to discuss, and definitely a lot of controversy that we'll try to get to as well. And if you guys want instant takes, Alan Stirk and I, along with Corey Woodruff and Adnan last night, went for an hour and 40 minutes on the post game show, just kind of getting into all that stuff. So if you want instant reactions, you could go check that out. That's up on the channel as well. Today we're gonna get into some of the same topics, but also, of course, we have an update on the injuries to Kaleb McGary and Drew Dalman that we're gonna get to off the rip here, and just kind of break down some of the controversy and some of what we liked, what we didn't like, and basically tell you how to feel about this team, because you're clearly not capable of coming up with your own answers. No, I'm sure you're very capable. We'll tell you how we feel about it. You can make your own decisions about how to feel about this Falcons football team. But before we do, real quick, want to bring you guys a word from our sponsor. As always, Bet Online, folks. Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. Falcons right now going up against the New Orleans Saints in Atlanta. I'll have to check on the spread, but I believe Atlanta is favored at the moment. And that's going to be an interesting one. Probably going to be another low scoring game. I think the Falcons have hit the unders on like every game so far. So we'll see if that trend continues. There's definitely some interesting bets there. Do the Saints continue to fall back to earth? Maybe the Falcons can fluster them a little bit. Can the Falcons offense get anything going with these backup offensive linemen we're likely to see? Definitely some interesting things to consider for that game. But no matter what you want to bet on, BetOnline's got every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. And if you think you know your stuff, BetOnline's got a new $200,000 mega contest. They've got a pick 5 games against the spread contest. Those are going on every single week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of over $200,000. And when the game's over, you can head on over. BetOnline's got a new online casino. They got blackjack, poker, 150 different slots games for you to check out. So what are you waiting for, folks? Head to that website today. It's betonline.ag to get in on the action. And when you sign up, make sure to use our promo code BELIEVE to get access to the latest promotions. BetOnline, the game starts here. All right, Tre'Shon. Well, real quick, I know everyone's going to be asking about the injuries Drew Dalman and Kaleb McGary. So with Kaleb McGary, looks like the best possible news there. It was initially reported by Ian Rappaport as an MCL sprain. It probably is still an MCL sprain, but it seems to be a minor one because they're calling McGary day to day. I don't believe that means he's going to play this week. I think it would be wise to not play him this week, but definitely, I think probably the best case scenario that it seems like McGary has avoided IR, so I think that's pretty good news on that front.
That's huge. And, I think a lot of people, we saw it last night. The run game is completely different with Kaleb McGary gone. The Falcons just clearly didn't feel comfortable even going to the right, at a certain point during that game. So, for all of his doubters and naysayers, we will see, hopefully not very long, but we will see why Kaleb McGary is valued and valuable to this team. Because, while Storm Norton has performed, I think, well, as that swing tackle when called upon, it's primarily, it's a little uptick in pass protection, minor based on the sample size. It's really hard to get much of a gauge, but you can see that the run blocking, there's a big drop off, and it's hard to replicate what McGary's been able to do on that right side.
Yeah, it's tough to it's tough to replicate that. It's such a core part of what this team wants to do. And, Storm Norton didn't perform poorly in relief. Norton played 46 snaps in this game. About an average run blocking grade, slightly below average pass block grade. But for a swing tackle, basically your third tackle on the roster, that's what you're hoping for, is like average starter type level play if you can get it. Because look around the league, starters are not performing that well at this point. So, I think that's one thing that fans don't really understand is like, they're like, oh, who are we going to sign? It's like, you think there's just starters just sitting out there right now? Like, if there were, people would be signing them. Okay, like this is a problem all across the league. Arguably the thinnest position in all the NFL. So, I think Storm Norton, is fine. But again, you're not going to have the oomph in the run game that you do with Kaleb McGary. And I think, like you said, his value to this team is going to be pretty obvious here after a couple games. The more concerning injury, of course, is to Drew Dalman. It is a high ankle sprain. Those are notorious for lingering, and that I expect that to be a 6 to 8 week sort of thing. We haven't heard an official timeline, but it does sound like he's going to end up on IR. So that brings in another reserve offensive lineman, in Ryan Newsel, who last year played fine for the 2 games he had to play. But again, you lose a lot in the run game. I actually think Newsel's a better pass protector. So I think the pass protection will be okay. He actually finished with like a positive pass blocking grade per PFF on about 42 snaps. But the run blocking, Drew Dalman, that was his thing. Elite run blocking center. They're not going to have that with Ryan Newsel. So they're going to have to adjust the game plan. And it also sucks that like McGary went out and then Dalman went out like 4 snaps later. Like not even like same drive basically. So that I think led to a lot of those sort of mid-game like third quarter issues where they're like, we have to now incorporate 2 new offensive linemen back to back. It's a rough situation, but how do you feel? Obviously we don't feel great, but with Ryan Newsel coming in, how big of a deal is that for this team?
Yeah, one, I think it's just Kirk now has to get comfortable with that handoff exchange. We talked about we're going to be under center more, and we've seen Kirk take more snaps. So they need to make sure that everything there is dialed up. I actually haven't gone back and paid as close to attention since Nunzio went in on how many snaps they took under center once he was replaced by Dalman. I felt like the numbers decreased a little bit there, and that makes sense. And I think the bigger thing is with this zone concept and this outside zone run scheme, the offensive line is supposed to work as one, holistic unit that moves in unison, does everything together. And it's a very, when you see a zone play hit, it is, beautiful. You see everybody moving in stride together. You see the GT combos or center guard combos working up to the second level and everything like that. And when it goes wrong, you see what happens last night when guys get pushed into the, into the backfield, because what that does is it eliminates the cutback that is basically set up for the running back to look at if the design play to the left or right isn't there. So if that A gap or that B gap is covered up by a defender, and we've seen Bijan do this many times, he'll stop one cut back to the backside, and then he's able to still get some positive yardage out of that. Whenever you're getting linemen pushed back into your lap, you're almost, eliminating that two-way go. And then in a lot of times you're being forced into making the decision of either running into that wall or, then you're trying to make a Barry Sanders-esque spectacular play in the backfield. And that's just not a good formula. So I think losing Dalman and McGary really hurts for that. But especially just not having the center there, because that is, the voice of the offensive line. And that is the person that is supposed to be the heartbeat of the zone run scheme. So it's going to take some time and adjustment for these guys to, figure out everybody's steps. How do we dance now with these 2 new guys in here and everything like that? And it's tough because it's definitely going to hit the right side harder than it's going to hit the left side.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's a tough situation, especially in game to do that. I think things will look better, obviously, with a week of practice and those guys getting to be fully incorporated because, it's such a big deal when the bullets are flying to make those changes. Like especially when you've had those 5 guys playing together for so long, you can't replicate that continuity and chemistry in a live game environment just with the bullets flying. That you just kind of have to find a way to get through it. And I do think, like, honestly, that the Falcons probably have 2 of the better, like, depth, like, linemen in the NFL, and like Newsel and Norton. I think that those guys are probably like average starter level guys. And a lot of teams don't have that luxury. So, I do think that ultimately the offense is going to be okay. It's obviously a loss, but look, you're going to have to overcome injuries in this league. Like they happen to every team. We just saw Eric McCoy go down for the Saints and how big of a deal that was for their offense. Yeah. They could be down to other guys. Like, you're going to have injuries. You have to find a way to weather it. And that might mean that this team has to be more pass heavy. I think honestly they've had a lot of success passing the ball. But how much, last week, this game against the Chiefs, they didn't really have very much success running the ball. They had to lean on more passing, and I think when they passed the ball, it actually looked pretty good. When they ran the ball, it didn't look so good. But the run is such a key part of what they do, and they build so much off of it. It's hard to, you can't just be like, well, we're just going to pass now. It's complicated. But yeah, 2 big losses. And thankfully, it sounds like McGary could be back. I mean, I wouldn't think he's going to be back this week. I think they would be wise to at least let him rest for this week, but possibly the Bucs game, if he really is day to day. But I don't think he's going to go on IR, so that's probably the best case scenario looking back at what that injury looked like. And at the very least, like, yeah, it is a high ankle sprain for Dalman. That's going to be an extended absence, but not season ending. It could be worse. So you just have to find a way to weather the storm, and hopefully they will weather the storm with storm, if you will. So yeah. He's perfect for that. That's why he's here. So, I think, we're just going to have to figure out a way to get around those offensive line injuries. And this is a big test for Zach Robinson. You could, new offensive coordinator, a lot of moving pieces now. We'll see what he's made of. But I think Zach Robinson is probably a good place to go next. And there's a lot of controversy in this game with some of these calls and things like that we can get to. But I do think that the offense has taken steps forward every week, and I think Robinson's like play calling and getting this team like where they need to be. I think it's taken steps forward every week, so hopefully that'll continue. But you can tell he's a young offensive coordinator that's finding his footing, and he's had to go up against like 3 of the best defensive minds in the NFL back to back to back. It's like Tomlin, you got Vic Fangio, and then you got Steve Spagnuolo, all back to back to back. And it's like, man, he's had to go through hell with these defensive, and Spags in particular. He took the gloves off at halftime. Was like, we are coming for you. We are going to be vicious with these blitzes. Let's get this like backup center in a bind. And they did. Like, the Chiefs played it well. But yeah, I mean, we could talk about individual plays in a second, but how do you feel about Zach Robinson through 3 games? Because I know we were kind of panicking after week 1. So
yeah, I think last week, we really talked about that experience factor, and it was something to the effect of where I was like, yeah, I think when you look at, the first 3 coaches specifically that he's going to have to go up against, that's like 60 years of defensive coaching experience.
Yeah.
Versus 1 year, or sorry, not even a full year, versus 3 games now, for Zach Robinson. And I think Zach did a really good job. You talk about just having to deal with, Spags and him taking the gloves off in the second half, but like there really was, a game within the game. There always is, but like you really saw that shine through this week. Robinson came out swinging, and the Chiefs, in my opinion, actually struggled with the initial game plan that the Falcons had for them. 14-10 in the half on the Chiefs is impressive. It's like, Of course, you'd always want to score more. You always want to take advantage of more opportunities, but there's not many teams that have even been able to, be in the position and maintain it throughout the course of the game to still be able to beat this team. When you saw the offensive line go down and then we saw Spags adjust, like you said, he's coming for you. It took them, the third quarter to kind of figure out what they need to do. but they figured it out. Like, we need to be very clear that Zach Robinson actually adjusted after that quarter and was able to get this offense moving the ball again, able to get them going down the field. And we'll get into the specifics of the couple of play calls that we know people are upset about. But this was not a badly called game. This was a game that had bad calls in key moments. And I think that that's something that we really need to focus on separating from each other, because there was a lot of good and a lot of promising things from Robinson that did come out of this game.
Yeah, I think they had the Chiefs defense kind of on the ropes there for a little bit. And this is a good defense. Like, I mean, I talked about it on the preview show, like they've given up some points and yards so far, but ultimately they're still a good defense. And that's what, they've leaned on that. I mean, the defense got that strip sack on Burrow last week to help them close that gap. That was critical. And this is a very good defense still. Some I think it's at least top 10, if not better. And Spagnuolo is really smart. This is a championship caliber defense with a championship caliber coach. And the Falcons, I think, like they weren't quite ready with the counterpunch. I mean, you can't really make a game plan to replace two offensive linemen like on the fly. I mean, you just have to be like, well, we're gonna have to try to go to some hot reads and some quick game and that sort of thing. And it's like, there's only so much you can do, right? And to their credit, they did figure it out. The screens were like, they did work a little bit, and then they kind of stopped working. But like, you have to do something, right? I mean, I would love to see more like wheel routes to Bijan and stuff like that. Maybe they'll continue incorporating that, because the Saints are going to blitz you too, so you need some kind of answer for that. But yeah, I mean, I do think that especially the first half of this game, like we were seeing the continued evolution of this offense. The Falcons came out doing exactly what I wanted them to. Like on the pregame on the preview show, I was like, the Chiefs are going to sell out to stop the run. They did pretty much the whole game, and they did stop the run. And I was like, so come out shooting out of play action, because they're going to be sitting on the run. And that's exactly what they did. I think the first like 2 or 3 plays were play action passes. Falcons got some chunk gains off of that and, scored a touchdown on the opening drive. It worked great. Great decision, Zach. It's exactly what I would have done. And I think they really had a good plan for the first half that went well. Putting up 14 points, that's a great start. When things went wrong, it was when they lost the 2 offensive linemen. And that's pretty tough to overcome. The one thing I will say that Robinson really hasn't figured out is third down. And that's obviously a huge problem. Falcons, I think, have converted only 2 third downs in each of their first 3 games, and they've gotten crushed in time of possession. And it's, that's not sustainable. Like, they will be losing games if they can't win on third down. So that has to be a huge point of emphasis. But I agree with you that ultimately, like, Zach has been doing the improvement every week, I think, is critical for him as the season goes on.
Yeah, and there's like 3 first downs off the top of my head that I'm thinking of too, where I'm like, that should have been first. Like the Bijan drop in the opening drive against Philadelphia. There's another similar play like that in Pittsburgh. So, there's definitely opportunities being left on the field, but you're 2-9. They're 2-9 on third down in all 3 games so far. And that's, that, like you said, you can't win football games if you can't convert on third down at a better rate than that. You need to at least be close to 50%. If you want your offense to be viable and take advantage of the amount of drives that they're given. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing. That's a little bit more frustrating, is that the Falcons are getting held up occasionally by some of those third down plays. They're great on first and second down. They're like one of the better early down teams in the league right now.
Yeah.
Which feels crazy, but I think that they're. I think that, like we said, we've seen them improve week to week so far, and there's definitely things we have quarrels with, but I really want to keep focusing on the fact that, this is not like we haven't hired somebody that we know has peaked. We still have a lot of things to learn about Zach. We're going to figure out, what is his new third down game plan going to be? How is he going to adjust the run game moving forward? And, a lot of other things that, this season is really just getting started. So I think that while of course there's a handful of plays we'd want to get back, that again the performance overall was fine. Some things that I would be more interested in learning on in terms of play call duties and responsibilities. When we look at that 4th and inches play, it's been well reported now at this point that that was a check by Kirk Cousins at the line, saw something different, saw something. I don't know what it is that the Falcons discuss. I don't know what the look specifically it was that caused, Cousins to trigger. But they had a, per Bijan Robinson, straight up the gut, down the center of the O line, run play called. Kirk switched it to the outside zone or the stretch play or whatever we want to call that,
whatever it is. Yep.
And it didn't work out. So, is Kirk limited in that scenario? Was Kirk only given one check play? Were there other plays that Kirk had available to him? What is it that he's looking for? There's a lot of things that go into, a single play. And then when you add in that factor on top of it, knowing like, oh, it was actually a check call, it's like, okay, well, now this completely changes, how we have to evaluate and look at this play specifically. So, what does that information do for you, Kevin? Seeing that after the fact and kind of learning, it's reminiscent of a certain game when we talk about checks and audible ability and things like that. And so I think you and I both know that there's limitations to those checks and audibles.
Yeah, there are. And I think if you go back and watch the replay of that play, I'm not really sure it would have mattered what the Falcons called. They got absolutely dominated up front from top to bottom. Like, everyone lost their matchup on that play. So it's like, I'm not sure that a straight push up the middle would have even worked. But, I think you can argue that it would have still been the higher percentage call. But I think their best chance was trying to have a miracle with Bijan, and obviously it didn't work out. We'll talk about this play in more detail. I know we got some insight from Keith Smith of all people about that play, and he seemed to be more complimentary than I think a lot of people would probably expect. But I think it wasn't a bad check by Kirk. And first of all, I think if Drew Dalman's in the game, they run it up the gut without hesitation. I think the backup center going up against a goal line formation like that, I get not necessarily trusting that. It just is what it is. No offense to the Newsflash. Everyone knows I'm a big Newsflash fan, but the game is different. It's a different situation with your starting center in there. I'm sure Drew Dalman's practiced the sneak and practiced the dive and all this stuff. And it's like, how much work has Newsel actually gotten to do that with the first team? Probably none at all or very little. So, it's one of those unfortunate game situation things that clouds the waters and I think should be included in the context. But it's sad to see it fail. I think going back and watching the replay and watching everybody get dominated up front, it kind of makes me feel well, I'm not sure there was a good play call there. I mean, maybe if you fake something and I think I always go back to the tight end leak because I feel like the tight end leak is undefeated when you see that goal line set. And the Chiefs were they sold out to stop the run. So it's the tight end leak probably would have worked, but and Charlie Werner was on the end there, but it's one of those things you only need an inch. Do you trust, would you rather just give it to your star running back or try a tight end leak? I'm a big tight end leak guy. So yeah, I'm oh yeah, all day tight end leak. But in hindsight, it's really easy to make that call. But I think pretty much everybody else would have been, giving it to Bijan on that play makes a lot of sense. I think a lot of people are maybe a little, if you want to be more upset, maybe criticize the third down play where it's wow, they got dominated on third down and kept them from converting a simple
run up the middle.
Yes, a simple run up the middle. You can't get it. It's the chemistry just fell off with this offense when Drew Dalman left in particular. And I think that affected a lot of stuff, including that unfortunately doomed drive.
Yeah. Yeah, no. The first thing I thought when I looked at the replay was, how is Nick Bolton free? And And luckily, the NBC was nice enough to post the end zone angle for us immediately. And when I watched the replay, it almost looks like Algier is supposed to approach this as a fullback. When he feels that space, fill it, have his eyes up and ready to take on the blocker. If he does that, it looks like Bijan probably has the opportunity to get the inches we're talking about here, and get that first down. After I put that take out there, we got some very good perspective from Falcons former fullback Keith Smith. Keith Smith looked at the play, and his first reaction was that it was not a bad call in his opinion. He didn't feel that the play itself was the issue. He thinks it just came down to the fact that it was an unscouted look, meaning that the Falcons had not seen this defensive formation or look by the Chiefs before, and that they weren't able to adjust on the fly and pick up that free runner. In his opinion, you would have had Algier work to the D gap, help combo there. Warner will then or the end tight end would then fall off and pick up the corner on the edge, and Bijan would be able to go out that way. I can definitely see that perspective. From my perspective, I think if you have a natural fullback in there, fullbacks are taught to fill that space. Fullbacks aren't taught to ignore space because of that exact situation. So even if it wasn't by design, somebody who's familiar and has those skills would have the awareness to fill, eyes up, and be ready to take that block on. So when we went back and look at the play, and then when we've talked through it, there was an opportunity for success, even with them getting blown up on the line there, like we said, which you obviously do not want that to happen at all, because if that works out, then you probably get the guard tackle combo, which then climbs to the second level to get Bolton in that situation, which is what most likely should have happened. Yeah. So with all of that being said, we didn't have this, legitimately terrible play call. And you and I also talked about it. It's not super surprising to see this offense go east and west. They have put out there on film in a 4th and situation, in a 4th and 1 situation against Pittsburgh, different set, different formation, different play design, same philosophy. Stretch the defense east west, make them think that they have to be worried about Algier or Bijan coming downhill. They give it to Bijan off the motion end around there. They get 10 yards off of it. They ran an end around with Ray McLeod last night for 20 yards. They ran another outside concept for a touchdown to Bijan with like a yard to gain. So I think that we're still learning things about this team, but one thing that's clear is that they value stressing a defense horizontally. Whether or not that's the best play call or the best situation for what we saw last night, I'm not making the judgment call on that, but it is something that the team has shown that's what they like to do. That's what they want to do in those situations. And they did call a play that had a chance of working. They just flat out got beat. Bolton made an amazing play.
He did. And he's, very, very good linebacker. So not surprising. That Chiefs defense, this is a championship defense. It's why they've made the championship. I mean, that defense carried the team for a portion of last year until that offense finally got it together. So, I mean, it's not surprising to me that the Chiefs defense came to play and ended up, coming correct on that drive. But yeah, I agree with you. I think the play call is not as bad in hindsight. I did definitely criticize it in the moment because I think a lot of people's instincts when they watch a 4th and inches is like, you just pound it. Like, and if you don't get it, like, you're like, okay, we lost, but like you pound it most of the time. And, I think in hindsight, it looks a little bit better. And you don't necessarily hate the call, but I do think and this is a broader discussion about this offense, is like, we probably, teams are starting to sit on the outside zone like they did against Arthur Smith. We need to see, like, what has Sean McVay started doing? Some inside zone and also some gap scheme stuff in the middle. And, Shanahan's done the same thing. In fact, I think the 49ers run almost as many man gap scheme plays as they do zone plays now. And I know people will say like, oh, well, this line was made to run zone. Like, they could run power. Okay, this is an NFL offensive line. These aren't like 290-pound like college, Big 12 like offensive linemen or something. Like they can, and shout out to the Big 12 UCF Knights in there. But the Big 12 not necessarily known for smash mouth football.
No, Trent Williams.
Trent Williams, notable exception to that. But I think they got to start incorporating some man stuff into this offense. I don't see any reason that they can't run it. And like, especially like Drew Dalman, his athleticism and ability to reach was so critical. Without that, I think you need to pivot a little bit and give Newsel some easier blocks. And honestly, like these guys, I'm sure these guys have been running gap scheme since high school. I mean, that's the nice thing about gap scheme. It's not complicated. Like you do the same thing every time. There's obviously a lot of wrinkles to it, but I'm just saying this could be an option.
And Kevin, I think it raises the question, because this is a thought that's been bouncing around in my head, because I agree with you. I'm like, this O-line set up to kind of be able to do whatever it wants. We're seeing problems carry over that existed last year, and we're seeing them not really want to do some of the things that we had expected, which was incorporate, got the Rams on the mind, incorporate some of those inside zone, split duo concepts, and other things that we were expecting coming into the year. And so I'm wondering, Dwayne Ledford got a promotion, and he is the run game coordinator. So those responsibilities and duties are essentially him working hand in hand and being Zach Robinson's lead guy when it comes to drawing up the game plan for the running attack each week. We've seen these issues, like you said, where teams started to just sit on the edge and said, okay, if you just want to keep running outside zone, just keep running it at us until you figure out that you're going to have to adjust. This is pretty much what you're going to get. And so they were getting, good returns, I think, through the first 2 games off of these concepts. And they started the game with a solid. I was like, I think I even tweeted out, I was like, getting 5 yards at will off the outside zone. And it was like, after that, Spags was like, all right, we're going to go do what we practice all week, and we're going to have an extra man sit on the edge there, and we're going to make them beat us. And then that job became even easier when you lose McGary. And so then at that point, the Falcons were running to the left because they had the most confidence there, but they still weren't, winning as many battles as they needed to, and kind of just started to get, found out. But to get back to my original point, I wonder how much control Dwayne Ledford has. Is he a little bit rigid in wanting to adjust after being in this heavy outside zone scheme for the past couple of years? And it makes me wonder if Zach Robinson or Raheem Morris is kind of going to have to step in at some point and have that conversation of, hey, we love that we can run these concepts and that we're so good at it. We have to be able to run multiple concepts, or else this running attack is not going to be as effective as it can be. Because like we're both talking about here, we're not an outside zone only offensive line. That's not how we're built. We're built to be able to do anything. And Smith used to have a lot more variance in his zone rushing attack, where I felt like we saw more of those inside zone concepts in year 1 and year 2 before they really wanted to commit full force to the outside.
Yeah. And I think it's one of those things that you might have to do out of necessity, but like we've seen the NFL shift towards this broadly. We saw it in Los Angeles. We Kyle Shanahan started doing it 2-3 years ago. And I think it's just like one of those things, like the best thing you can do is, and it works, it's for offense and defense. It's universal. You need the defense to not know what's coming. Like if you become predictable, it makes everything you do so much harder. And, even if this isn't an elite gap scheme offensive line, they're not the biggest offensive line in the world. They're not tiny. I mean, Bergeron's like 325. He should be able to run whatever he wants, and I think this offensive line can do it. They've been very reluctant to do it so far. I mean, I think we all thought we might see more of that, given that, Robinson was coming from Los Angeles, who basically made a very striking, shift to running more man scheme, gap scheme stuff in the last season, and it worked wonders for them. that offensive line is not a power running offensive line either. That they're pretty similar in makeup in terms of size to the Falcons offensive line. Kyron Williams is not a bowling ball running back. He's probably, I mean, he's not even as big as Bijan,
Yeah.
and Bijan's not small, but I'm just saying Bijan's not a 230-pound Derrick Henry bruiser. He's 215, plenty of size, but you don't need, I think that's a great myth about gap scheme running is you don't need the biggest bruising offensive line and the bowling ball running back to make it work. In fact, one cut guys actually work pretty well in the gap scheme, because if you could just get out of that hole off a GT counter or whatever, usually you just have to make a linebacker miss and you're big money, So I don't see any reason that they couldn't incorporate it. I understand that maybe that's not something they practiced, but I mean, I would hope that that could be one of their adjustments is to take some pressure off of Newsel, who look, we probably shouldn't expect Newsel to be as good hitting those reach blocks as Drew Dalman. That was kind of his specialty. So in that case, maybe simplify things up front a little bit. Maybe have him do some center guard stuff and some guard tackle stuff. I think, with your right tackle power guy out, and going to a center and Ryan Newsel, who maybe doesn't have the same range, lean on your guards, and that's something I want to touch on too. Matthew Bergeron has really, I think, come on over the last 2 games. Looks way more comfortable. And the matchups have been getting harder. I mean, obviously week 1 was brutal matchup, but we just watched Jalen Carter crap all over the Saints offensive line, almost single-handedly, and Bergeron handled him without trouble, and obviously Lindstrom handled him too, and that's not surprising. But Bergeron had a great game this week too, and he had to face Chris Jones sometimes. He had to the Chiefs interior is kind of underrated. They've just found guys there that are pretty good. Yeah. And I think you've got Bergeron and you've got Lindstrom. Your interior could you could win with this interior group. Now Newsel, we don't really know exactly how he's going to pan out in terms of the run game. I think he's a solid enough pass protector, but I think that's a good option, especially if they want to diversify it and make this run game less predictable, because this should be the strength of the team that you can lean on. And I think we've just seen, especially this week, the Chiefs were just kind of able to sit on it, and it wasn't fooling anyone.
No, it wasn't. And I think that, again, we're talking about playing some of the best interior and just defensive lines kind of across the board and defenses in general. So it's very good to take these lumps against these teams. You're not really having head scratch, you're not oh man, how'd the Chiefs score on it? Or how'd Patrick Mahomes, they had an Andy Reid and Steve Spagnuolo, they were able to adjust.
Can't believe this.
It makes it easier to deal with. So I think that obviously we're hoping that everybody is able to get back healthy, because that's going to have one of the bigger effects in terms of what is this team able to do and how are they able to adjust their running game moving forward. I did have one question for you. We mentioned Bijan. Did you anticipate Bijan being the best blocker in the backfield this year? Because I got to tell you, that is probably the biggest surprise to me so far. Is he's hands down through 3 games offered more as a blocker than anybody, and that was just not the case last year.
No, I mean, honestly, they had to go to Algier in some situations when they needed a pass blocker last year because he was just not up to snuff. But I think, I said it on the post game, and it's when you see a guy really clearly invest the time, energy, and attention in improving something as banal as pass blocking for a running back, I think that's the sign of a great player, because it's this is not flashy. This is not going to get the accolades. Very few will appreciate it. But it's critical to being a bell cow running back, right? It's critical to being a 4-down, play everything running back. And the improvement is so striking that this was a point of emphasis for him this offseason. I'm going to become a good pass blocker. And he was a good pass blocker in college, but the NFL is different, as we saw last year. He got overwhelmed at times, just wow. Because in college, it's oh yeah, he's just a big running back and he can handle it. But in the NFL, it's not the same thing. You're gonna get some big boys in your lap. So, that Nick Bolton rep Like, and the refs like almost they wanted to flag it because they were like, I can't believe this running back just did it. But like you look at it, it's totally clean. He's like pulling off like offensive line moves with his hands. He's like slapping Bolton's hands up over and over again, like spinning him around. I mean, like that was an incredibly impressive rep. So yeah, I mean, great stuff from Bijan there. And I mean, people wonder why he's dominating snap count so much. It's not because Algiers a bad runner. It's just like he doesn't need to come off the field. And like I think the one time they took him off the field for Algiers was kind of like, well, why did you do that? You just brought him right back on the next play. You know, it's like I don't really get that. I mean, I get that maybe Algiers got more power up front, but like Bijan has not shown any problems with his power either. Assuming he gets an inch, like I mean, that goal line play, you know, where they did score the touchdown is a perfect example of that. He had to run through defenders to get in there, and he did. You know, so props to Bijan on that. Good stuff there.
Yeah, no, I think, you know, they're still figuring out how to divvy out those carries. Boy, the Jace McLean pick looks hilarious. And I'm like, it's a 6th-round pick, so like whatever. But I'm just like, okay. I'm like, Tyler's barely getting the ball at this point. Yeah. There's nobody else. They're not wasting their time giving anybody else the football outside of those two. And yeah, you know, I think they will get better at kind of being able to work Algerian, but you know, this is the part of being Christian McCaffrey that's not fun, that people don't talk about, like you said, that typically goes unnoticed. And when they were doing all that boasting about, hey, Bijan's going to be, you know, Christian McCaffrey, Bijan's going to, you know, be able to be on, do all these things, my first thought was, well, can he actually? Because like being that person requires being able to block. And, you know, that's a huge part of that game for those offenses, because then there's no tells. Then there's, you know, the OC has a completely different comfort level because he's not worried about defenses keying in on which running back he has, which has become a huge thing in the NFL because you have guys for 3rd down, you have guys for 4th and short, you have guys for this. And so when you have not one, but 2 guys who can essentially, you know, do whatever it is you need to do, it makes sense why we might feel like, okay, at this point, Bijan's getting, you know, a big bulk of the work. But I think that is at some point also going to have to get dialed back a bit, because eventually hits that up. You know, we're going into the longer stretch of the season now. And I feel like that's almost what you preserve Tyler Algier for, you know, giving him that lighter load at the beginning of the year. And then you ramp up his work when everybody's tired and everybody's sore, but his legs are a lot more fresh because he hasn't had to be the bell cow, and he's been able to be back there and kind of get a bit more of a not a break, but really just kind of be as fresh as possible when they need him. And it's worked out. He's ripping off. I think he's averaging like 5 to 6. He's every time he gets in there, you know, he's doing his job well. You know, there's not really much more we can ask of Tyler, except we need Tyler to be a better blocker. But you've asked a lot of your players this year, and you can't just expect that transition is going to be easier, because it does feel like this team looked at Algier and they're like, he's bigger, he's a little bit stronger. Yeah, that's fullback. We're going to be able to just transition those skills over to fullback. But you see, it's a very different position, and your instincts work a lot differently when you're taught to block a certain way as a running back, which is almost always as help support and never as lead and isolation support outside of blitz pickups. So there's definitely going to be a learning curve, and it's going to be interesting to see how they adapt to it. It really makes you wonder, did you need to push Parker Hesse out for Ross Dwelley? Did you need, like, when I look at the end of this roster and I look at some of the guys sprinkled in, it's like, oh.
Yeah, Ross Dwelley's had like 3 plays and they've all been bad.
And it's like really frustrating, because it's like, all right, you guys have been very like almost stingy with some of your personnel. Like Cordero Hodge isn't touching you use the same 3 wide receivers every time. You're using the same exact personnel for a lot of these groupings and stuff. So we're not seeing a lot of variability. So just knowing that it's like, man, you could have a Parker, you can have a fullback for these moments, or a wing back if it makes the OC feel better about whatever they want to call them, since they don't want to commit to a fullback in the modern era. But it's kind of clear at this point that the Falcons aren't. You can only ask Charlie Warner to do so much. He's in there operating as the blocking tight end behind Pitts. You need that third guy. And they don't have that third guy on the roster right now who can be an impact blocker for them. And it's just unfortunate because there were options, affordable ones, and they just kind of elected to go a different route. They maybe just valued the pass catching ability a little bit more, but it's pretty clear that whoever the tight end 3 is on, this game day roster suiting up, they're not going to be doing anything except blocking. And we're not really getting good blocking.
Yeah, no, it's rough, and we haven't really seen. I think we expected Werner to be a bigger part of their plans, and he's not really. They've basically committed to that 3 wide receiver set after week 1 as being like, we're just gonna do that. And like, I don't blame them. Like, Ray's playing better probably than anyone expected, but he doesn't offer. He's not a blocker. Like, he's tiny, right? Like, he's a small guy, short king, as they say. And like, Drake London has really stepped up his run blocking after week 1, where, kind of looked like a little bit embarrassing. I think after that, he was like, yeah, I'm a good run blocker. I'm going to fix this. But like, Mooney and Ray are tiny. Like, they're like sub, like what? Ray's thicker. I think Mooney's like sub 190.
I think Ray is 2 inches shorter than Mooney, but he's thicker, about 10, 15 pounds on him.
Yeah. Mooney's like a little beanpole out there. So
Mooney, I'm like, gosh, sometimes I'm worried. Like, they're not putting him in harm's way, but it's just like, once those screens started getting off, I was like, all right, let's make sure
he does seem to have a knack for like taking contact though. Like I noticed that, like, he just kind of like takes it and just kind of goes down. Like, he doesn't, like, he knows when to stop. Yeah, he knows when to stop or when to go out of bounds. So that's important when you're sub 190 in the NFL for sure. But yeah, I mean, maybe this will be the last point in the offense. Like, the play of the wide receivers, I think that was like a big concern for a lot of people going into this season. And I think so far, like, it's so clearly not the wide receivers' problem. Like, those 3 wide receivers are absolutely fine. And Drake London needs more targets, but like, I think the lack of targets for these guys is a function of that third down offense failing. Like, they're just not sustaining drives. Like, and when you're not sustaining drives, there's no targets because you're getting the ball for like 20 minutes in these games. And it's every single game now. So that's why targets are low, because they're just not running that many plays. So,
but they're coming. They're coming. London had 9 last night. Yep. He's leading better. The team in targets right now after a very slow start, and I think Mooney's right behind him in second place. So, hopefully we see that trend continue and things start to pick up there.
Yeah. But I think, it's funny, and this will be a good segue into the defense. I think people were really concerned about wide receiver 3. Like, Ray McLeod can't be our wide receiver 3. That's a huge problem. Not a problem. And the other one, Mike Hughes can't be our corner 2. Well, Mike Hughes says, you're wrong about that because I'm going to be just fine. And yeah, I mean, we talked about it last week. Like, this was going to be the test because he was going to have to go up against Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy, Juju Smith-Schuster. He lined up against Travis Kelce on a play, but I mean, I don't really blame him for that one. That was kind of just the way that formation was set up. He didn't have much of a chance to even get there. Mike Hughes, cornerback 2, UCF legend. What do you think about Mike Hughes so far? Because I think he's kind of alleviated most, if not all, of our concerns. And this week in particular had that tough matchup and was not fazed by it.
Yeah, I didn't love Hughes' game. I went back
wasn't
through
the best.
Looking at it. I went back through, and then I started looking at some of the advanced stats, and then I went back and looked at something again that I had felt, but wasn't really. I was too busy maybe trying to confirm a bias going into it. And then I quickly realized, we need to shift gears here. Hughes was targeted 6 times. He gave up 4 receptions and like roughly 50-ish something yards, something like that. And I thought he did pretty well considering what he was asked of. Like you said, he draws a tough matchup against Kelce. Things happen there. They were able to get one. That it is what it is. That happens to everybody. overall, though, didn't really do a bad job. That was the only play where he really surrendered some yak. And in terms of CB2, like, yeah, that's what's going to happen. You're going to get the ball thrown at you at a little bit of a higher clip. It's kind of what more we were expecting. But there was another cornerback who I think's kind of been flying under the radar as like
Yep. I know where you're
having
going
a
with this.
pretty bad season. And then I had to like go and double check, and I was like, oh
Yeah.
no.
I felt a certain way live, and then I had my fears confirmed, and when I looked at the stats. Yeah, go ahead and put the stat out there because it's terrifying.
Yeah, D. Alford is getting absolutely picked on at this point. He was targeted 9 times and he gave up all 9 receptions, and that is coming off a game in Philadelphia in which he was targeted 7 times and gave up 6 receptions. He gave up a passer rating of 138.2. He gave up 69 yards, 36 which came after the catch. There's a huge problem in the slot right now, and Atlanta hasn't really adjusted yet. We haven't seen them rotate really anybody else there. We've seen like Richie eat up some snaps in a couple of very specific scenarios, but outside of that, like, they don't really seem like they want to put Clark in the slot much this year, which is a very different approach than last year where they were willing to use him inside out. Hamilton was healthy.
Yeah.
You didn't really see him get the run that I was kind of expecting.
No, he didn't play at
especially
all.
with, I mean, when you talk about 9 for 9, I mean,
Yeah.
that's it. Once you get to 5 for 5, it's kind of like, all right. That's when you start looking around the bench and you're like, okay, Hamilton,
Is there anything we can do about this? Yeah.
start warming up, because this is a problem. And I just don't know if maybe the Falcons were like, hey, you know what? It's Hamilton's first game back. This is the Chiefs. We're just going to roll with Alford this week, and we're going to take care of that after the fact. But yeah, it's been a bummer to see, D. Alford is really kind of fallen off to start this year and isn't really giving us the play that we'd become accustomed to.
Yeah, last year so good, right? I mean, it was kind of inexplicable to take him off the field for Mike Hughes, which they did later, and that did not produce good results either. This year, I don't know if it's the scheme change, if he's just a better man corner. Maybe there's something to do with that. This is a complicated coverage scheme. It may be that he's just taking longer to adjust to it than some of these other guys. But yeah, I mean, this can't continue. He's the one spot right now that is a big problem in the secondary. 9 for 9. You can't have that. Like, he's not contesting throws. He's missing tackles. I mean, I think as a run defender, he was better in this game than he was in weeks past. He only missed 1 tackle on 8 attempts, I believe, or 9 attempts. So that's much better from a tackling perspective. But it's that coverage is just, it's not good enough. Antonio Hamilton is waiting in the wings, so I think at some point, if this doesn't improve, we're probably going to see Hamilton. I agree with you. Like, they're probably not trying to rush him back. He was probably more like, he's healthy enough to be our insurance this week, but we don't really want to rush him out there coming off that injury. I don't blame him for that. And D'Alford didn't cost them the game by any means. Like, it wasn't to that level, but you're considering how good he was last year. It's just a shame to see this so far. I'm certainly hopeful that he'll be able to bounce back and that this is just like some growing pains with the new scheme and that sort of thing. But yeah, a very concerning stat, 9 for 9. You don't usually see that in a game. You don't usually see that. Now, there were the Chiefs passed the ball a ton. Like, Mahomes had a ridiculous number of attempts in this game. Again, a product of the Falcons offense not stringing together any drives. But don't love that. Don't love that at all. We gotta heap some praise on this safety duo though. That has completely changed the complexion of this defense, and I think we were hopeful that it would, but I think this was the first game we really saw like that 2 safety set terrifies offenses, and they're just not testing those guys for the most part.
Yeah, the question has been answered. Who is the best safety duo in the league? And it's clearly Bates and Simmons. Simmons, I think, had his best game of the year. He targeted once, Zero, 0 yards, 1 interception, and the interception came in the red zone. It doesn't get sweeter than stealing points right out of Mahomes' lap.
Yeah,
And that was,
that
just
was a
even
critical
imagining the
play.
Falcons doing something like that is
Yeah.
crazy. And yeah, fourth interception in a row. There's now no defender has more interceptions against a single player than Justin Simmons has against Patrick Mahomes now with 6. And the duo just like, man, it's just so fun. You don't I haven't been worried about a deep ball this entire year. I'm like, and it now I totally get it. Like, maybe not before the Simmons signing, but now that Simmons is here, I'm like, yeah, the QB, the cornerback 2 plan is fine. It really is fine because Mike Hughes isn't covering, 20 to everything behind him. He's just worried about 10 to 20. AJ Terrell, he's worried about 10 to 20. They know that they've got these guys behind them, and you can tell it's completely changed just the entire approach and everything that this defense is willing to do this year. And yeah, man, it's so great to see. I don't feel like we've had so many impact free agent signings all show up so early in the season. You talk about Judon, Moody, Ray, Simmons. These guys are hitting the ground running, and that's kind of, rare. So just kind of being able to see all of this happen real time. And I mean, Simmons missed the whole training camp. Like this is it's like this is crazy. Simmons and Judon both missed like all of training camp and have showed up and are the second and third best players on the defense with only Jesse Bates standing in front of them. So it's just crazy.
No, it's been huge having Judon here. Like, I know he hasn't been like incredibly productive. I mean, he did have 3 pressures in this game, tied for the team lead with Caden Ellis, who also had 3 pressures and 2 hits. I think people were hoping for more. I would caution people to just give it some time because the Falcons they want to do a lot of creative stuff up front. They haven't really been able to. I think the Landman injury hurts that a lot, and like the fact that up until this week they had to play 2 like running quarterbacks, and it's like there's limits to what you can do, like with your sim pressures and stunt game and stuff like that against those running quarterbacks. Like, you have to be gap sound. You can't necessarily loop around and do crazy stuff. The one time I just remember that Grady play, he just tried to go around and it's like Justin Fields is like, oh, there's a hole. Okay, I'm going. And so it's like you have to play it a little bit differently. But I know the pass rush has not been what we want so far. I don't think it's been problematic for them thus far. It's been like they've created enough pressure, but it hasn't been a plus either. Like, and I think the interior defensive line has not pulled their weight. We need them to start doing that. I think Onyemata had a better game certainly against the run this week. I know he had I think Onyemata had 3 run stops. Great, awesome, led the team. His Onyemata as a pass rusher has been off this year. It just doesn't look right. You wonder if he's still rehabbing from last year, that injury. He didn't look the same after that injury. Thankfully Grady Jarrett has kind of stepped up in that regard. But like that unit should be better. I certainly hope that they will. They just haven't quite, I think, figured out the secret sauce with that unit yet. There's a ton of rotating going on, and that's not a bad thing, but it's like, I'm going to need a little bit more. And then it's like also whoever's playing opposite Matt Judon is just a black hole that's not doing anything. Shout out to Ebiketie. He did have he had a pressure in this one that was decent, but it's like, man, that I need more. I need more. Like Lorenzo Carter, I can't have you out there with a 35 PFF grade, like doing, getting 2 pressures and not, and having 1 tackle on 41 snaps. I'm going to need more than that. Okay. Now I get that they didn't run at him a lot. I mean, that's true. Right. But it's just like, I'm going to need more from that other edge spot. And like, maybe that's just James Smith-Williams. Maybe this is the Smith-Williams renaissance or something. Maybe once Nate Landman gets back, they just put Caden Ellis out there on the edge and they just let him play. I mean, I don't know, but the defensive line, like especially the interior guys, we expect more from them. But to this point, it hasn't like been a problem. I mean, they haven't like shut anyone down, but they've done more than enough for this. Like if this offense is like semi-competent in a lot of these games, they probably win, and that worked out against the Eagles. They were semi-competent this week. Unfortunately, completely collapsed after those offensive line injuries, and then we've talked about it. Couldn't get it done in the fourth quarter against the Steelers. Obviously, that offense just looked totally broken for most of the game. So especially the second half, but the defense has been a pleasant surprise. I think they still we need more. But unfortunately, we need more because the offense is having a slow start. Not surprising, but yeah, I think what do you think is the biggest issue right now with this defense? Because I think ultimately they've been playing well and they deserve praise. But what do you think in terms of what do we need to see for this defense to actually become I think right now they're an above average defense, but what do we need to see for them to become a good defense?
Yeah, it's tough. Arnold Ebiketie with the very rare hip to hip full circle swing pressure. You just I feel like a lot of the work that Judon is doing is kind of going unnoticed just because of the amount of attention that he's garnering from offensive teams, the amount of help blocking that he's drawing to his side. And we just really haven't seen anybody capitalize on the other end. And so I do think that pass rush, is once again kind of the crux of, the defense's issues right now. Or maybe a better way to say it would just be the one thing that is going to keep them from being elite or certified top 10. Because a bad pass or a good pass rush would cover up pretty much all of the other issues that we talk about on this roster when, we don't have two cornerback ones, on the outside and, we don't have this or that or blah, blah, blah. It's a lot of teams don't have that. Most teams don't have two starting caliber cornerback ones on the edge, but go look out and see how many teams have Jesse Bates and Justin Simmons in their safety room. We're the only team that has that. So whenever you start getting to this level where the Falcons are, where their roster has been retooled over the fact, you're really looking at what are the 2 to 3 changes I can make to really push this team to the next level. And it's after watching this game, it's fullback, edge, and a starting tackle or lineman out on waivers right now who just is hanging out.
Just walk right in. Yeah.
That's really the biggest improvements that this team can make. And I think that, they have done a really good job at getting pressure from their 5-man front looks and some of their other, 5-man plus looks. They have not done a good job of getting pressure out of base. That's really where you see them struggle. I haven't updated the numbers yet, but coming into this game, they had 14 total pressures. Only 2 of them came out of base. The other 15 came when they had a 5-man front or 5 men on the line pre-snap. About a third of those resulted in one person dropping. So they do get pressure occasionally with just rushing 4, but it's not happening consistently. And, we saw, they weren't great at it, but when you sacrifice that 5th or that 6th defender, that's when you start, dink and dunking on D. Alford 9 times. That's kind of when you try to have to take that same approach against, Mike Hughes as well. And that's, the folly of having to bring that many guys, just to get some pressure. So I think that that's really it when we look at this defense right now is a lot of these other issues go away if you're able to shore up that pass rush.
Yeah. I think I agree. I think the pass rush needs to come online a little bit more. And I think if they can find a way to generate some more pressure, that's when this safety duo, they need some pressured throws, right? They need some stuff to happen. That on that Mahomes pick, he knew Caden Ellis was coming. He was coming in hot, and he was but Mahomes was oh, I got this. He threw a nice pass. It unfortunately was a nice pass to Justin Simmons, but you need to speed up the clock and force guys to throw this ball where they don't want to throw it or before they have time to fully read the field, because these two safeties are ninjas back there. Justin Simmons baited that the whole way. He intentionally waited to make his break until he saw Mahomes was loading up, and he's okay, here we go. And then thing of beauty. Awesome stuff there. But like, you have to generate pressure to force those mistakes. Like, it's really hard to get quarterbacks to put the ball in harm's way if they're not under pressure. And the Falcons haven't been awful at generating pressure. I mean, they had 11 pressures in this game, so that was a good start. But it's like, you got to generate with more consistency. And, you know, obviously it was big for the Chiefs that like Wanya Morris was ready to go in this game and they didn't have to rely on Kingsley Somatia, who was getting absolutely abused the last couple weeks. But like, you still got to get it done, you know, and you're going to have to, like, this Saints team that they're about to go up against, if you can't get pressure on Derek Carr, he's going to dice you up. That's Derek Carr. Like, if you get pressure on him, he turns into a pumpkin. If you can't, he looks like he's a good quarterback, and that's the duality of Derek Carr. So,
Yeah, I think that boy, it was great to see Carr come crashing down to earth.
Slow motion car crash, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, trying not to indulge in too much Schadenfreude, but you know,
yeah.
Always love to see that, especially, you know, leading into the week that we're currently in. So I know you and I talked about this preseason. We were kind of ready for the Falcons to have to, you know, answer or figure out some unique ways to get some pass rush going. They have found something that works with these 5-man fronts. You know, Caden Ellis is really balling out. It is such a bummer to. This is exactly what happened last year, and we're just seeing it from the opposite end. We talked about, man, everybody was like, "Oh, we didn't need Troy. Troy going down didn't mean anything." Blah 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 blah. And it's like, well, we didn't see Caden really get to do any of the stuff he's getting to do now, but because Nate is out, we're still not getting to see Ellis be able to do this at a larger clip, which I think at this point is what Lake wants to do. He's probably like, yeah, man, this like this Caden Ellis stand-up inside linebacker stuff is fun, but this is not the move. He was like, this is not what I want this guy to be doing. I want to have Landman back there. I want to have Troy back there and call it a day and let Ellis operate as my second best pass rusher, because that's who he is. Caden Ellis is the second best pass rusher on this team. And it's until we can kind of get the inside short up there, hopefully Landman is making good progress, you know, two games minimum from this point still. So still set to miss some time, but you know, he's really being missed right now. And who knows, maybe with his return, we do see that shift and we see them start to move towards, hey, like whether it be Carter or whether it be Ebiketie, somebody's snaps are getting eaten into, because we need to have somebody else coming on the other side, coming on the other edge right now, because Judon can't do this alone.
Yeah. I think like we saw the run, like Nate Landman, such a great run defender. He changes the entire complexion of that run defense. And like, it's been a big loss with him out in the run game. But like what you said is absolutely correct, because they wanted this 3 linebacker set because it frees up Caden Ellis to not have to play linebacker. And I think they want him to play edge. And we've seen it. Like, he is so good as a pass rusher. And people forget, like, he was an edge rusher in college. The Saints turned him into an off-ball linebacker out of necessity, and he was a decent, you know, to good outside, like inside linebacker, but he's a better pass rusher. He's a guy that I think is good. Like, he's a good jack of all trades guy, but like, he needs to be rushing the passer more, especially on this team that desperately needs pass rush. And it's just, you're going to be limited in how much you can deploy that, because JD Bertrand isn't ready. I think he's still got to put on weight. I think he's just not ready. Like, that was really JD Bertrand's red flag on his scouting report, was like, this guy needs 10 pounds. Like, he's 230. Like, this is not going to work in the NFL. We saw it in the preseason. He's just not big enough for the NFL right now.
We've even seen it on special teams with him getting holding calls and stuff like that. It's really, the size is just a lot for him right now.
So he's got to put the weight on. He's got to commit to that. I think the tape for him has been like good. Like, you like the college tape, you like how he looks, and he's another guy, very talented blitzer, but like, he's not ready. Like, there's a reason he's not playing, is because he's not big enough, right? So, you know, so they can't really go to that yet either. So it's like, until Landman comes back, they're not going to be able to deploy Ellis the way they want. And that's going to limit what they can do a little bit. But, you know, so far, like, we are like turning a critical eye to the defense because this is, we're trying to analyze all facets. But overall, giant thumbs up to the defense. Like, they've done everything we could possibly ask. They've put this team in a position to win every single week. Even with the offense playing horribly in week 1, they still put that team in a position to win. They didn't allow a touchdown. Like, they've like had to overcome all these turnovers. Like, and the offense has gotten better at turning the ball over, certainly, as the weeks have gone on. That's a very positive sign too. But a lot, like, this defense, this offense is going to have to pick up the slack soon. But like, even though we're being a little bit critical, like from an analytical standpoint, like, hats off to the defense. They've played their asses off and have done what they need to do to win. And that's all you can ask. Like, this, I think people were concerned about this unit. I think right now it's like, I'm more concerned about the offense. Like, get your shit together, guys.
Definitely.
Like, the defense is playing their asses off against two of the most difficult to defend offenses in the NFL. I mean, I know they caught a break with AJ Brown being out last week, but still, like, that's a tough team to defend. You held
Patrick Mahomes to 10 points in the first half.
Yeah. Like they did not go off. Like, I mean, I think they
up 22 in the second half. And that's with the offense again. Like, you're talking about really burning you, putting you on the field. That, like, when we talk about their run game
with no first down,
it's like the run game worked so well because the defense was exhausted. Like, that's one of the biggest parts of that. It's like, it wasn't just like, oh, they're just getting blown off the ball. It's like, yeah, man, they've been out there a long time, and they've been out there longer than the offense in 3 straight games. That is going to start adding up. This defense can't be hung out to dry drive after drive, because eventually they're going to just break from sheer exhaustion.
Yeah. And to their credit, like, they've just played great football at the end of games. Like, they've really, like, that is something that I think is, that's like a heart thing, like, it doesn't matter that they've lost the time of possession game by like 10 minutes. Like, they come out and play their best ball at the end of games. They did it against the Eagles. They did it against the Steelers. They gave the offense a chance. And they did it against Kansas City. They gave the offense 2 chances against Kansas City and Pittsburgh. Like, so it's like, eventually the offense has got to start paying these guys back, or at least take them out to dinner or something. Like, I mean, this is getting ridiculous at this point. Get them a nice steak dinner. I'm sure Kirk Cousins has the ability to do that, but I mean, that is probably like 25 guys. So that, we're talking a pretty significant bill depending on the steakhouse, but get them something nice, a little stocking stuffer. Yeah. Cousins has got it. Yeah. That's not a problem for him. So, but yeah, it's, ultimately, I know a lot of people were bummed out about losing this game. Totally get it. I think this team hanging with the champs, and we didn't even really discuss the DPI thing. There's not really anything to discuss. It was an egregious missed penalty by the refs. Falcons should have had 4 chances from the 1. Not really much else to say about that. You can't go back and change it, but this team gave the Chiefs everything they could handle. The defense stepped up, shut them down in the second half. I mean, I think like they held the Chiefs to like 2 net yards or something total in the second half, something crazy like that.
Yeah.
Because of like the negative plays and stuff, and the penalties that the Chiefs piled up. So it's like, this defense did everything they could. The offense and I think that, again, the offense, I think, was really starting to find their footing, unfortunately. And then 2 offensive line starters go down in the span of like 4 plays. It's like, well, that you can't do much about that. I mean, I'm not going to hang Zach Robinson out to dry for that, certainly. But, we're starting to see some adversity that they're going to have to overcome here. And this is a critical 3-game stretch. So hopefully they can get it together here and figure out a way to get these division wins over the next couple weeks. Because if they can just sweep this stretch, I mean, they'll be leading the NFC South and just they'll be in great position the rest of the season. I think it's probably unreasonable to expect 3-0, but like they need to at least split the Tampa Bay New Orleans games. I think that's pretty obvious. But both of those teams look a lot more vulnerable now than they did like a couple days ago. So.
Yeah, Tampa's just reeling with injuries. It's really surprising they were even able to beat the Lions with 5 guys out that one, but you could just tell like it's just too much for them right now. So you really hope you can get that one, and then big game coming up this week, first one of the division. So if you can if after 4 games the Falcons are 2-2 and 1-0 in the division and 2-0 in the conference.
That's all I ask.
Doesn't really get better than that. Like, like obviously we want to be undefeated, but that's a great start. Because this was the part of the schedule where we were like, yeah, man, they're going to take some lumps here and it could get ugly. And none of these games outside of week 1 on one side of the ball have been ugly. They've been in every single one of them. They've been competitive and they've looked competent. They just have things that they need to clean up. And this staff is still learning, all together. Like, no, this isn't Raheem's first head coaching job, but it's his first one in a while. Being an interim is a little bit different. This is Lake's first time as a defensive coordinator in the NFL. Robinson's first time as an offensive coordinator. They're still figuring each other out. They're still working, they're still working out all their own, issues and everything like that as a team and as a group. And I think that they're going to grow and learn and get better from it.
Yeah. I think so too. I think this is, it's going to, like we said it before the season, it's going to be a tough opening slate. It's going to be a rough September. I hope they can finish September strong. Obviously, getting that Eagles win was critical after kind of fumbling the first game. I think this week is massive. Obviously, I mean, it's a Saints game. It's always massive for many reasons. So they got to go out and get it done. It's not going to be easy. The Saints are not the crap team that they sort of look like they might be going into the season. I think they're probably not as good as they looked over the first 2 weeks either. But we'll have to see. This is not a pushover game. This is going to be a critical game for this Falcons team, and I think especially in Atlanta, they got a great chance in this one. But they're going to have to make some changes and figure some stuff out with these offensive line injuries. But they do have a week to do it, and they can prepare a little bit more than they were able to last week with the 2 guys going down. So, yeah, good stuff, Tre'Shon. Appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe if you haven't done so already. Leave us that 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. You can support the show on Patreon, on the YouTube channel memberships if you'd like. We appreciate that. And then, want to plug, of course, Falcoholic.com and Tre'Shon's at Tre'Shon on the Twitters. Anything else you'd like to let people know about before we sign off?
No, just we're going to be doing a lot of more hard work, looking at the game, trying to, really peel back and do a good look, an honest look at this team and just kind of, think about where they are now. Have they peaked? Is this who they are? I don't think so. I think that there's still a lot of good things to be hopeful for. And we are 1-2, but I'm very excited about this season of Falcons football. And I think everybody else should be as well. There's definitely something different about this team. And the quarterback play has completely flipped the script in terms of what they're able to do and who they're able to beat every week. And it's been very refreshing to just be able to turn on the game and feel that this team has a chance.
Yeah, exactly. It's, Kirk hasn't been completely the sharpest yet, but I think it's clear he's getting better every single week. And it's I think the best is yet to come from this offense. We've just kind of scratched the surface. New offensive coordinator, moving pieces. I honestly think if they didn't have those offensive line injuries, they look like they were about to hit their stride and really it was going well. It sucks. It sucks that they didn't, but it's gonna take some time. And again, I think even last year, what we said was before the season, this team's gonna probably have to finish strong. They have the first part of this schedule is the hardest part. They got to get through this 3-game division stand here, and they got some tough games coming up after that, right? They got Seattle looks pretty tough. Cowboys don't look as tough, thankfully, but there's some, the Vikings game's a lot harder than it initially looked. So there you gotta get through some of these tough games, but they I think as long as they hit their stride. Now would be a good time to start that, but the Saints have their own issues, so maybe we could figure out a way to get that dub. That would be big. But yeah, I think the best is certainly yet to come. This is a team that has a lot of room for growth. I think last year the thing was they started 2-0, but they were threading the smallest possible needle, and you look back at that in hindsight, and it's wow, they are really hiding Desmond Ridder. They are really there's at the time it wasn't so obvious because I think everyone was just excited to be 2-0, and I don't blame anyone. They hadn't even won their first opening game since 2017. So it's I think this is a much more realistic path to being good than like praying that Desmond Ridder like continues to not make any mistakes and like not get away with 4 turnover worthy plays that none of them were picked off. So or beating the Bucks by turning the ball over 4 times and still somehow beating them. Hopefully don't have to try that this year. But I guess they did manage to win that game. So hopefully we can win some games a little bit easier than that this year. But thanks again, Tre'Shon, for your time. Thanks again for tuning in to the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast, guys. We will be back on Wednesday night for Falcoholic Live at 8 p.m. Eastern. And then, of course, we'll be getting into week 4, hate week prep, as we'll have a Saints game preview coming up. And then, of course, post-game show following the game. So look forward to that. Big week ahead, big game. We'll see you guys there. I know you'll be there. Check out thefalcoholic.com for that written content as well. Until next time, folks, have a great day. Thanks.